Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Spencer, thank you for being here. Thank you for your willingness to serve. Let me say at the outset that all of us are grieving and lifting up in our prayers the 15 Marines and sailor who were killed last night in the C-130 crash in Mississippi. And we certainly want the men and women of the Navy and the Marines to know that we're standing with them as they're grieving those losses.
Yes, sir.
I want to ask you initially about morale in the Navy, and that's been a concern raised by a number of observers. What is your sense of the current state of morale, and what needs to be done to improve that?
Senator, the Navy Marine Corps team is biased for action. No is a tough word to pull out of the vocabulary. In my opening comments, I talked about how they've been continually engaged and stretched thin. They will never let us down. That being said, we need to make sure, whether it be changing the PCS move notification time out to where it was at 6 months versus 1 month, to more sweeping needs in benefits and compensation to deliver a better product. As I view my job defined by Title 10, if confirmed, this is a key focus that has to be addressed. Morale is the barometer.
As of yesterday, the Navy reported that it had 276 deployable battle force ships, with over a third of those, 103, currently underway for deployment or training. Do you believe we currently have sufficient capacity to meet the strategic requirements we've placed on the Navy?
There might be two answers to that, Senator. Let me say that with the assets that we have right now, we are managing the best in my overview that we can. It comes down to risk management. Are we addressing every single risk? No, we're prioritizing them. With more asset, more capability, and more capacity, we could do a better job.
So what is the current deployment to dwell ratio of the Navy, and how does that need to be improved given shipbuilding and fleet growth is a years-long initiative?
If we could, again, I go back to the primary tenet of industrial science when it comes to productivity. If we could have a clear sight to funding and resources, I believe we'll have a much more efficient flow through on maintenance, whether it be aviation, whether it be seacraft. This will fit into adjusting the dwell time back to a normalized rate. And I think that's where we really have to focus, because again, that goes back to your original question, is where's morale? We have to adjust both.
How do you plan to rapidly rebuild the fleet, taking into consideration the CBO's recent analysis that it would take until the year 2035 to reach a 355-ship Navy, even with accelerated shipbuilding?
Senator, first, I look forward to working with the CNO and the expertise that is involved in the naval organization. That being said, I really think we have to start thinking outside the box, whether we look to the ready reserve, what's sitting on the water that's been quote-unquote mothballed, whether we look at expediting a frigate transition. All of these have to be taken into account to expedite putting capacity on the water.
Talk for a minute about the Ohio replacement submarine program, and the Columbia class would be the country's second most costly acquisition program in history, and part of a $1 trillion program to modernize the nuclear triad over the next 30 years, and the submersible leg of the triad is responsible for roughly 70% of the nation's forward deployed nuclear warheads, and remains a vital part of our national security. A little over a month ago, it was reported that the program suffered, quote, its first known glitch in the overheating of a prototype motor. Where do you think we are in replacing and upgrading the Ohio-class submarine, and what needs to be done?
Senator, I've not received any classified briefs on the actual performance glitch you're talking about. On a fundamental basis, as I said in the opening statement, that I believe the undersea leg of the nuclear triad is the most survivable and probably one of the, we put it this way, we must address the replacement situation. It is a huge cost, a huge expense, I realize that. We're going to have to work in a whole of industry, whole of government solution to address this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Spencer, for your willingness to take on this new role. The Navy instituted something called the Accelerated Promotion Program to allow shipyards to compete with the private sector. As I'm sure you're aware, one of the real challenges we have is that many of our skilled workers are aging out, and replacing them in a tight work environment is very challenging. So the APP guarantees that engineers hired into the 4 public shipyards at the GS5 or GS7 levels will be eligible for a one-time accelerated promotion to the next higher grade after they complete a training program. Do you think that kind of program is helpful in retaining the workforce that we need, and do you have other ideas of how we can get the workers we need to keep our shipyards up to date?
Senator, I'm not aware specifically of the program, and I've confirmed I look forward to finding out more about it and sitting down and having a conversation with you about it. I do have firm beliefs on how we're going to have to work as a team, both the industrial complex and the Department of the Navy, to go forward and fulfill our goal to put capacity on the water. Whether that is what we used to call vocational schools, training schools out in the communities. I've been informed that for a welder, it takes 7 years to become a journeyman. That's an extraordinary amount of time, but that's an extraordinary important position. We have to start filling the pipeline and finding any vehicle we can that is beneficial to supply the process.
Well, thank you. I'm sure that Senator King would join me in inviting you to come up to the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard to see the APP program and to hear more about the challenges that they're facing. I hope you will be willing to do that.
I look forward to it, Senator, if confirmed.
Thank you.
It's a great experience.
This committee has spent a lot of time on the challenges that Russia presents to Eastern Europe and to our allies in Europe. And obviously one of the places where we've seen them be the most aggressive is in the Black Sea, where they have, with increasing frequency, buzzed our ships and our planes in both the Baltic and the Black Sea. Can you talk about what you would do as Secretary of the Navy to respond to that?
Senator, Russia is a threat in many ways to the country. We must, and I think every single naval officer, and also weapons person, whatever, is trained that they must protect themselves from lethal force, but they also must weigh in restraint. We have to stand strong. We have to have avenues of communication open with our adversaries when it comes to professional actions on the seas. One would hope that in the military sector there is professionalism that spreads to all, even our adversaries, that we can have communications in that regard.
Do you think that those communications have so far been successful? Or do we need to establish more channels?
I would think I have not been briefed in depth to it, Senator, but on a topical basis, I would think would need more channels.
Okay, thank you. I was surprised to hear in testimony before this committee that China is looking at a 350-ship Navy by 2020, given the challenges that we're facing as we look at our long-term needs in the Navy. Are you concerned, as if you become Secretary of the Navy, about what that means for China's ability to have more control over the South China Sea and other seaways where we might come in conflict?
Most definitely, Senator. The goal that one of the presentations that I sat through was 2045 as a goal of China to have many things in place. Their ship count in 2020 to be larger than they are now. It all concerns me tremendously, and I think we have to respond in kind to have the capability and capacity to ensure that we are positioned to enforce the free shipping lanes for not only ourselves and our interests, but for those of our allies.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Spencer, for your dedication and your service to our nation and your family as well. And I was gratified that you mentioned the tragedy last night, and our thoughts and prayers being with those families. On June 17th, the Navy experienced another tragedy, as you well know, when the USS Fitzgerald was hit by a ship under circumstances that we don't know completely, and I understand there is an investigation under the way. One of the sailors, sonar technician 3rd class Tan Nguyen from Connecticut, was among the deceased, and I attended a memorial service for him just last week, and his family is still grieving, as are the other families who lost loved ones during that incident. The commander of the United States 7th Fleet appointed Rear Admiral Brian Fort to lead a Judge Advocate General manual investigation of the mishap. I'd like to know, if you are confirmed, will you commit to ensuring a prompt and thorough investigation of the USS Fitzgerald collision with the cargo ship ACX Crystal, and will you commit to reporting its findings fully to this committee?
Senator, prompt, thorough, and transparent with expedition.
Thank you. There's been talk about the construction of submarines, the Columbia class and Virginia attack class, which is required to go from 48 to 66, as you know. And the challenge, as Senator Shaheen mentioned, is not just with the flow of materials, but also the industrial base, and not only at Electric Boat and Newport News, but also the supply chain, the defense industrial base. And I wonder if you've thought about what can be done to provide the kinds of training and skill development resources for the suppliers and contractors and all the medium and small businesses that are involved in that defense industrial base.
Senator, I'm glad the supply chain has been brought up, because we definitely have a limited supply of hands and backs to build things, but people many times don't focus on the actual supply chain itself. There are many cases out there in the private sector that we can take best practices from. Off the top of my head, we did a study at the Defense Business Board, and IBM, when Sam Palmisano was there, took over when IBM was in its grips of looking at running out of cash, and a major American icon almost going into bankruptcy. And one of the things he did was restructure his supply chain, which he now bills as a $16 billion competitive advantage. How did he do that? He brought everyone in the tent. I would see us, whether through DLA, beyond the Navy, the whole DoD acquisition force, having to really do a whole of team effort in this regard.
Finally, let me ask you about the CH-53K. As you know, it is the replacement for the Marine Corps' only heavy lift helicopter. It will play an integral role in the United States Marine Corps for probably decades to come, improving the CH-53E Super Stallion. Will you commit to supporting this critical program, assuming you're confirmed?
Most definitely, Senator.
And let me also ask you about the F-35. The Navy has a variant of it. What's your view of the F-35?
Again, I've not received any classified briefs, but just in my knowledge gathering over the past month, The Marine Corps is quite excited about what the F-35 can deliver as a platform. The Navy has its plans to adopt the fifth generation, fourth generation structure within their aviation wing also. I look forward to finding out more if confirmed.
Will you commit to supporting the plans underway now for acquisition?
Yeah, I do, because it doesn't seem like there's going to be a major change, but yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We thank you for your appearance here. I take it you have completed all of the paperwork, is that correct?
That is correct, Senator.
Well, it'll be my intention then to move your nomination at the next gathering of the Senate Armed Services Committee, and we look forward to confirming you clearly before we reach our well-deserved rest of a pause for the month of August. So we will be moving your nomination quickly to the floor of the Senate, and hopefully we can get it done to get you to work. Senator Reed? Thank you, Mr. Spencer. We
Thank you,
look
Senator.
forward to interrogating you again soon.
Thank you.